alarm! To arms! They are here!
Good evening, and welcome to the Watchman's Report. I'm Cody Higley, and tonight on this pop-up broadcast, we're going to kind of just talk about whatever the hell we feel like talking about, probably national issues, maybe a little bit of state issues thrown in there. And we've got our man, Richard McDonald, joining us tonight. Jason Foreman is also here with us, but he's under the weather, so he's just going to man the boards and do all the back end things. So we all wish Jason and his family a speedy recovery. This is the time for flu and cold and everything else. So if you haven't had it yet, you're probably going to get it pretty soon. And the Foreman household has got it. So, Richard, how are you doing, man?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Got that shirt there with GW.
Yeah, we got George on there.
Washington. Yeah,
The original gangster.
Looking pretty stellar. So we like that. Lots going on nationally, Richard. You know, from the release of more files, Epstein files, everybody is interested in that. We've got continued saber rattling over in the Middle East, Israel and Iran. You've got a whole slew of things going on here in the state of Ohio. You've got the stay that was issued by that left-wing DC judge, Reyes, on the Trump administration's decision to end the temporary protective status for upwards of 20,000 Haitians that were dumped during the Biden years and under the purview of the Rhino Mike DeWine's administration into Springfield. And then Mike DeWine and even his wife, Fran, opened their big fat mouths in trying to scare people and defending the idea that these Haitians should be allowed to remain. So, what topic do you want to start with, Richard? You're a very well versed, very well rounded, good old conservative. So, what topics, and maybe there's something else you want to talk about?
Are we going to touch on anything local?
We'll have a discussion.
Are we going to touch on anything local or stay just national?
If there's something you want to talk about local, man.
No, I just thought we'd work our way out if there was. I mean, Springfield's about as local enough for us. It's Ohio, so it's home essentially.
Yeah.
And so it does touch national.
What are your opinions on that issue, Richard?
As far as the wine, you have to wonder the motives, obviously, especially at the end of his term here, advocating for a 40% increase in the population of that city, dumping people there. And I don't want to use that term. I know it sounds like, kind of we're talking about livestock or something, but in the grand scheme of things, anytime you put 40,000 or about 40% of a population into a city, you're going to overwhelm everything there. So logistically, it's a terrible plan. And so, motive has to be our primary question there. And his to the grave defense of it is curious to me. The whole idea of temporary protective status for these people, which is a designation based on country. Haiti's been a mess for most of my life.
Forever.
Yeah, really.
The Haitian Revolution, and that was an absolute bloodbath under Leoviture. And
Yeah, they seem to be on a peak and trough cycle, and we keep seeming to kind of take them in like the orphan family somehow. We spent a lot of dollars there, but now we're reversing the train and bringing them here, and I think this all kind of overlays with things like Trump's executive order on the 14th Amendment. And my concern with anytime we bring a large population like this on temporary status, those people, they're young, they're breeding age, and we've got a lot of concerns that, is the motive really just temporary till we can, relocate them or take them back home, or is it to get them here so that they can be anchored in place by other methods? So I don't know. Again, I don't know what the motives are, but none of it is logical.
I agree with you. It's completely contrary to, the national interest or the interests of the people of the state of Ohio, if you're looking at the DeWine level and even the local leadership in Springfield. Now, folks, I want to do an in-depth show on this because, in my opinion, this story hasn't really been told. It's a critical story, I think, critically important story, because it's setting a precedent. And it's not like it hasn't happened before. It just hasn't really happened in Ohio to a city of the size of Springfield. You can look at other examples. Hamtramck, Michigan, which is surrounded by the city of Detroit, would be an example. Dearborn, Michigan, would be another example that's fairly close to us here in the Midwest. But there are many others. It's just to the scope, the scale, what happened to the city of Springfield beginning around 2020. So Mike DeWine issued a letter in December of 2019 in which he stated that Ohio is open. Ohio is open for refugee resettlement. And then they have subsequently, in a period of 5 years, essentially, dumped 20,000, upwards of 20,000 into Springfield, which had a population of roughly 60,000, I believe, at the 2020 census. And this is a city that admittedly has been in decline. It's been down on its luck for the past 60 years, kind of a quintessential Rust Belt city. But imagine if the city of Marion, where you have roughly 35,000 people and you have a sizable number of, vacant homes and that sort of thing. So the infrastructure, yeah, you could have more people in the city of Marion. Let's say they dumped 10,000 foreign individuals, third world individuals. So these are not people, they're not doctors, they're not lawyers, they're not the upper crust of Haiti. Haiti is essentially, has been for many, many years, like Richard was saying, a failed state and highly dysfunctional. One of the highest crime rates, if not the highest crime rate in the world. And gangs are very prevalent. It's a really bad country. But now you might have some liberals out there, and I heard certain individuals say that even today. Well, that's a Christian thing to do, and we want to bring in people here and let them seek refuge in this country. Well, you can't have open borders, Richard, if you have the welfare state. To me, it's one or the other. If it's going to be open borders and everybody fends for themselves, provides for themselves, they're a burden to no one. That's one thing. I still wouldn't agree with that. from a cultural cohesion or a national cohesion standpoint. But certainly, you cannot have open borders. You cannot be taking refugees or whatever you want to define them from the third world into this country if you have the welfare state, right?
No, yeah, not only that, but common sense would dictate that if you wanted to bring those people and actually assimilate them, you wouldn't dump 20,000 of them in one town where they would overwhelm it. You would disperse them to the country so that they would actually assimilate into the culture. You're diluting a population of a city like that with people that don't have, the experience with the city, the way the municipal systems work, the education system. I mean, the story after story of the roads and traffic issues there, all these things that are just, when you're blending two societies together, taking that entire mass of people and dumping them in one place. And like you pointed to, it's happened a lot of places. Rarely is it a place where it's so small that it's so obvious. If you put 20,000 people in a town of 1 million, nobody notices. But when you take a small town like that and overwhelm them, it starts making national news. And just like in the last presidential cycle, they're eating the cats and the dogs. It was kind of a news soundbite for a while, but those stories were reported from local sources. Whether they were accurate or not is another story, but you have those things, and the natural pullback of people in that area is that they're looking at the community they've been in, and some of these people are multi-generational in that area, and it's a completely different landscape, and you really start to ask why at that point. And if I can go back to one other thing you mentioned, which was the appeal to the Christian values. This argument I find really fascinating from liberals is they spend their entire day telling us of this imaginary circumstance of the separation of church and state. They rail against the idea of Christian nationalism or theocracy, but their entire argument to appeal to Christians is that we should take our values, our personal values as Christians, and invoke those into the government, which is essentially what they're asking. So the inconsistency of the idea is laughable to me, that you would tell me you don't want me to through legislation enact morality or anything else, but I'm supposed to be, when it comes to your social causes or your socialism light or your open border policy, I'm supposed to suddenly govern from a Christian perspective now. There's no consistency to the thought process, so it's disingenuous because of that.
Oh, it totally is. But that's the argument. I heard it today again from a local left-wing podcast, and they are essentially atheists that are making these arguments.
Yeah.
They're projecting this upon actual Christians to try to, make them feel bad, I guess, or what have you. But again, it comes down to the reality that you can't have this open borders
No.
and unfettered immigration policy with the welfare state. And if you look, and that was the other thing, the other argument was made by Mike DeWine, and a lot of other people are repeating it. It's going to be a huge economic hit on Springfield and Clark County if you remove all these 20,000, you send them back to Haiti. Well, that operates under the assumption that there aren't Americans in that area who are seeking employment. And yeah, those companies might have to pay an American a little bit more money in order to do the job. But isn't that what we should want? Shouldn't we want our people, natural born American citizens, being able to secure gainful employment with a decent wage? That to me sounds like the goal is what it should be. But a lot of these, again, I want to do, because there's a whole lot of stuff,
Sure,
whole lot of details that need to get out. And they were using employment agencies that were all crooked and owned by these NGOs or encouraged by these NGOs and owned by this Haitian. And then they would ship them in and they were connected, getting their cut. The employment agency would get its cut, and they were throwing them in these little apartments and houses, packing them in like sardines. And they were all working at these different companies in the Springfield area and in Clark County. And they were getting paid employment agency wages, which are substantially less than if you're hired on, as if any of you have worked at one of those, like a Deco or whatever, how those employment agency contracts, but they were even getting less beneficial terms because of their situation. Well, again, whose interests are they looking out for? Are they looking out for the people of Springfield, the citizens of Ohio, American citizens? No. They're looking out for these corporations because they want cheap factory labor and these third world Haitians. So just probably one of the biggest scandals, I think, honestly, in the state's storied history. And the big fear is that the goal is to repeat it. We've talked about it before, and maybe we should do a show on that, Richard, as far as the fertility rate, the birth rate across Ohio, the projected significant population declines that we're going to be facing in the next couple decades, and especially in rural areas. So, what will be the solution? Will it be to encourage families? Well, this country has murdered upwards of 63 million unborn, or will they just flood in people from all over the world? And like you said, dump them in en masse, as a collective in this city. So Mansfield, you get 20,000 Afghanis. Marion, you get 20,000 Syrians. Springfield, you get 20,000 Haitians. Lima, you get 20,000 Sudanese, with no thought on the impact to the local communities from an infrastructure standpoint, from healthcare, from school and education. It's just it's a nightmare. It really is, and it should be really something at the top of people's minds that why in the hell was this done? How was it done? And who's to blame? And you can look right at Mike DeWine in his troll-like Gollum.
He's a master of disguise. He's turtle.
Yeah, he's turtle. He's turtle man. Right. So
the turtle kid.
Yeah, I mean, do you think people should be fearful, like if you live anywhere else in the state of Ohio?
Yeah, so the problem that we have and why we got kind of an apathetic populace is that the people that this is affecting predominantly are too poor and concerned with living day to day to probably even watch this show. They're probably right now trying to figure out where their next meal's coming from, their grocery money. They're struggling, and they're the ones being most impacted by it. They're the ones that when we import these people to this country, we have to understand it's basic economics. If there are X number of jobs, the more people competing for those drives down wages, especially at the low skill spectrum, which is where the working poor generally are. And going back to the manufacturing side of it, like if there are people who need to fill those jobs, those companies are going to have to compete. But when they can import cheap labor, they don't have to compete. So the people that this is most adversely affecting are the people that are probably most unaware of it. So, the people at the top that are benefiting from it are making those decisions. But again, unless you're in that small community today, it's a non-issue. The people around here, they're just trying to get by in life. So that they're not listening to it. So people have to bring the awareness, because it is going to be a small town like Marion. They'll just keep doing it. And I truly think, like I said before, the logical conclusion, if you wanted to actually bring those people in here and help them, would be to spread them out across the country, get them into homes, and make them become Americans. What the idea is, or what we see at least, like in places like Minneapolis, places like Detroit, Dearborn, places where these people have come in, is they just keep importing more through chain migration, and then they overwhelm the city. They become a voting bloc, and next thing you know, we've got a representative in Congress for that district that is a foreign-born national that has, migrated here when they were probably young or something, and now they're naturalized, and they're voting to, basically overrun the country more. So I think that's the idea of dumping them in one area. Those people, if they get legal status in Springfield, they'll dominate and control the government if they want to. I mean, they're a giant. They're more homogenous than the people that live there are, even though those people may have been there for generations and know one another. They're going to be ideologically different, the people that are native to that community. But those Haitians are going to come there and vote for their own interests if they get the opportunity to participate in government, which is what they do. Again, we see these mass migration waves, and it's just city after city in the United States. So I think that's the intention. I think there's some money being obviously laundered through the system. You have to really dig into it because they're good at it. It's all through NGOs and things like that have these really kind of obscure finances and record keeping, and you don't really know where it's going. It's all circular, but yeah, it's coming to Marion eventually, if we allow it to. I mean, if we don't stop it here.
Coming to a city near you, folks, unless you put a stop to it. And the mere fact of this DC circuit judge issuing this stay, I mean, I'm confident that it'll happen. This is just the tactics that the left uses. They use these whack job judges to hold things up. And the goal is to delay. And she'll be overturned inevitably. And eventually something will happen with the temporary protected status, and they'll try to go in and remove and send back to Haiti, which was the agreement all along. This is temporary protected status, temporary. And it was all derived, or all the origin was in the wake of the earthquake that happened in Haiti, I think back in 2014 or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was the arrangement. But a lot of times these rhinos and these Democrats, these establishment types, people that don't give a shit about you or me, that's what they do. They say one thing out of one side of their mouth, and then when the time comes, say the exact opposite out of the other side of their mouth. So this is very important that it's not allowed to stand. And we've already experienced an unprecedented amount of immigration. Talked about that, I think, the last episode, but just as a reminder, in 2020, census data showed that I think it was 15 or 16.8% of the country was foreign born. And that's not including all the illegal aliens. And it certainly is not including all the illegals that were brought here or that came here during the Biden administration. So
yeah, these are people that are answering a census.
We have a substantial number of foreign born, and we have a whole lot of illegals in this country. So the whole notion of a nation, if you want to look historically at what has been functional, what has worked, it's homogenous peoples. It is a true nation where they share a common language, culture, history, value system. That's what works in history. What we've been lied to, Richard, over the past 50 years, 60 years, is this whole notion that diversity is our strength. It is not our strength. It has been, show me somewhere in the course of history among nations or states where diversity has been a strength. It was the whole argument of the rainbow nation of South Africa that was made to say, well, South Africa, we've got whites, we have sub-Saharan Africans, we have Indians, we're all going to get along and it's going to be great. No, that didn't happen. As soon as the ANC under Mandela, who was actually a communist, he gets a Nobel Peace Prize and he gets heralded by the left and the globalists as being this great man. No, he was a radical communist. And they quickly went after the Boers and the white South Africans to oppress them, to the point now where, Trump let in a number of South African refugees because they're being genocided in South Africa. There's a lot of, if you're interested in that topic, Lauren Southern did a documentary called Farmlands, probably 5-6 years ago. It's really good. And she traveled around the country, covered the topic of the genocide in South Africa that's been ongoing. And South Africa is essentially a failed state. I mean, it's approaching that levels. They'll have areas of the country where they'll have some power outage and it'll be months before it's resolved. They have basically civil service and different job positions. If you're white, you're not eligible. So they've gone complete opposite of what the apartheid when white South Africans controlled the country. But I think, honestly, that's the template for this country, is to make everybody so intermixed, but yet tribal, to where they're constantly battling with each other, fighting amongst themselves, so then you don't worry about what the elites do. You think that makes sense, or am I?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think if you want to see what America's going to look like in just another generation or two, if we allow this to continue, you can look directly at South Africa. That's what they'll do here. If you listen to the radical communists that are in all these movements in the United States, that somehow we've fallen so far as a nation that these people are allowed to march in our streets. And I respect the First Amendment, but we used to take these communists and give them the boot. Now we're letting them walk around like they're normal humans. And basically what they're doing is spewing hate. If you want to talk about ideology of hate and bigotry, look right there, because the things they say in the streets, in particular regarding whites and just the structure of the country altogether, they think that we're kind of indemnitely incapable of being repaired. They want to burn this country to the ground, take any people. Well, essentially what they want to remove is white people. And I'm not saying this from a racial perspective. I'm saying with these people, that the communists that are marching the street, these are the things that they're saying. There was the representative out of Texas in this Democrat district this week. He's I think he's Chinese born. He's Chinese born, but he's a naturalized American citizen, that said that it's over for the white man as soon as and he's not. This isn't some back room. He's on the news being interviewed. As soon as the Latinos, African Americans, and Asians realize that they outnumber us collectively, that it's over for us. And this is exactly the same concept of South Africa. That's what they're going to do. They're going to keep importing people, take over the voting block, and then it's going to be, South Africa here. And it's just going to take a generation or so. Again, you take 20,000 Haitians and bring them into Springfield and put them there in temporary status, knowing that the courts are overwhelmed and that they're going to apply for asylum and different things from their temporary status, and they're going to have babies here, and those babies, by this miraculous concept of the 14th Amendment, are going to be American citizens. It's a backwards process, but it's intentional. You overwhelm the system. This goes back to the Cloward-Piven strategy for the welfare system to bring in UBI and stuff. Same concept. Take a system that's designed to function, to help people. I don't have a problem with Haitians. They need help. If we want to help them, that's a conversation we can have. But you take a system that's designed to function, and then you overwhelm it to the point that it breaks, and then you need a new system. And that's what they've done. That's what the Biden administration did with immigration. They broke it in every way they could. They broke the courts. They broke the immigration. They flew 750,000 people into the country on planes. Our country spent money to go pick up people and bring them here. And that is an absurd idea to me. And I think it woke up a lot of people too, to the reality of what, it was so over at that point in time that you couldn't ignore it. And then small towns like Springfield pop up or someplace else. It happened throughout the country, but that was the one that made the news primarily. And it's, for us, it's close to home. So most people here have probably been through or around Springfield, and you may not know a lot about it, but it's one of those just small community here in the Rust Belt. So, and it's not that, it's like, full scale invasion, but it seems that way if you live in a place like that. Like I said, just like you said, 10,000 people in Marion would be the equivalent. And you know what that would do to housing costs and just facilities, services, educational systems. It just overwhelms everything. So no rational person would do. There has to be a motive behind that.
Exactly. I mean, 100%. And I'm committed. We'll do a show, a deep dive into that particular case of Springfield, because I'm sick and tired of hearing this false narrative, these lies that are pervading amongst the mainstream media, amongst the rhinos like Mike DeWine. Not only how that happened, but the impact today if they reverse course and send them back. It's all bullshit. It's all lies, and it needs to be exposed. And we will be doing a show on that. We will be discussing that in depth. So stay tuned for that one. Now, as far as other hot topics nationally, Richard, we had another big dump of these Epstein files. What were your thoughts on that? I mean, did you have any initial thoughts when you saw that they had this mass dump of files? Do you take them at their word? Do you think that they've been revised, edited? What do you think?
I think to me, I don't want to dismiss the idea of the files, but they're a secondary issue. I'm not saying they're not important. I think we're in a crisis state in the country and a couple of other fronts that are way more important. I don't really see, other than this being a political football, where it's going for anybody. I look at like the legislation to compel the attorney general to release these files. It was sloppy and stupid, in my opinion. You've got millions and millions of pages of documents. There's no mechanics that you can go through those in any meaningful way and redact what you need to redact. The chain of custody for this stuff's been decades long. We don't know what's legitimate, what's not. We know there's going to be people that are powerful that are implicated and things like that, but to me, it's just a big political football. I watched, Tom Massey and Bondi go at it today. To me, the entire effort and push is nonsensical, just because I don't see, as with the size of that organization, how they could, again, meaningfully go through there and protect the people that need to be protected, or expose people that they wanted to, or decide who to redact on millions of pages of documents, photos, and all these things. It was going to be a train wreck from the beginning. That being said, why did it take so long to get these things into the public, or should they be in the public? I don't know. I mean, we don't know what's in there, so it's hard to really make an assessment. But the whole thing, in my personal opinion, is political football. I think they're just, both sides want to take it and use it for what they can. I think it's kind of like, the Democrats at this point are really a couple single issue, party, really. They're playing with this football right now because it benefits them, because they've got $1 trillion media machine where they can push propaganda out. They've been saying that Trump's in the files and all these things. And while those things were anonymous, they could say that. Now they're coming out. Now they're scouring through. They're trying to find relevance in that. But I just don't see, they had, some of these files are 20 years old. A lot of it is. And they've had all this time, to release it. Nobody cared up until recently. Is that Trump's own doing? Were the people that are in his, administration that said that they were going to do this on day one? Yeah, of course. But I just don't see, I think it's one of, I think the Republicans handed this gift to the Democrats and the way they handled it. And the Democrats have this, they have this issue and abortion to run on. And abortion's a losing issue at this point. So I think this was a gift and a dumb gift to give them, but I think it was lose-lose largely for the Republicans, regardless, even if they weren't implicated or Trump wasn't involved, which, going back to however many thousands of times his name's in the files, okay, that, being mentioned isn't the same as being implicated in a crime. So where's the smoking gun? They keep telling us we're getting it. It never comes. So I just think it's
as soon as you saw the articles where they would have headlines or summaries of what was in the huge dump of files, and they try to say that, oh, he was a KGB or a Russian agent.
Krasnov.
As soon as that happened, I laughed and I said, this is bullshit. So I don't believe majority of, I'm not saying that they went through and they're all fabricated. I'm sure a lot of it is kind of mundane or less than thrilling, but on whatever key files, whatever key documents have probably been severely edited to protect certain parties and to point the finger at other parties. And I'll give you an example. This is the clearest thing that I can say is, who was Jeffrey Epstein? And who was he married to? Who was Ghislaine Maxwell? And who was Ghislaine Maxwell's father? Ghislaine Maxwell, her father, was a man. If you look in the media, they'll say his name was Robert Maxwell and he was English. Well, no, he wasn't. His birth name was Hyman Benjamin Hawk. He was actually born, I believe, in Czechoslovakia, or Czech Republic, I believe, or maybe Slovakia, modern day Slovakia. Anyway, somewhere in Central Europe, Slavic area like that. He was actually Jewish. Okay. So racial Jew. I don't know religious Jew if he was practicing or not, but he was actually one of the key founders of the Israeli intelligence, which is known as Mossad. You can look all this up. This is all not oil hat territory. This is all declassified truth. And then he moved to England and worked with MI6, which is their intelligence. And he changed his name to an English sounding name. You can't go around and say, "Hey, my name is Hyman Benjamin Hawk," so he changed it to Robert Maxwell, a good English sounding name. And so you got a state funeral, okay, in Israel. That's how important he was. Countries don't give state funerals to just anybody. When I croak or when Richard croaks, we ain't getting a state funeral, and neither are you. Very, very few people get a state funeral. Presidents and highly regarded dignitaries of a particular country might get a state funeral. That's about it. Well, Hyman Benjamin Hawk, aka Robert Maxwell, got one in Israel. So, key intelligence operative. His daughter marries Epstein. Okay, let that sink in. Think about the magnitude of that fact, that family tree, as it were. And then Epstein, who was by education just a math teacher, he then navigates his way into managing wealth for some of the wealthiest Jewish individuals in the world, including Ohio's own billionaire Les Wexner. So you have this going on where his father-in-law is one of the founders of Israeli intelligence, and then he's getting all his money, managing money for some of the wealthiest Jewish individuals, billionaires, and then
He,
getting private jets and different things like that. Um, so when he has this Epstein Island and bringing all these different politicians and uh, elite individuals, and they have all these women, and I think it was probably a lot worse than what is being portrayed. I think you could go there and whatever your twisted heart desired, you could get. And then they were using that to blackmail those individuals. And that's what happened, period. Now, did you have other connections, CIA connections, um, continued like MI6 and British intelligence and stuff? Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it was, but it all originated around that. And, you know, if you haven't seen the movie, it was Stanley Kubrick's, one of the greatest um, directors of all time, in my humble opinion. He did Full Metal Jacket. Uh, he did a lot of good work. He also did The Shining, so one of the greatest horror movies, in my opinion. Um, he did a movie, his last movie actually, um, was starring Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. And it was called Eyes Wide Shut. Have you ever seen that movie,
I haven't seen it,
Richard?
but I've heard of it. I haven't seen it though.
I highly encourage people to look into it. And in fact, Kubrick died not too long after that. And if you talk to his daughter has done many interviews where he was basically kind of outcast, kind of shunned, maybe more. He might have been Epstein, uh, for making that movie. But the whole premise is the um, derangement and the sexual, uh, what word am I looking for? Dysfunction, um, occult nature of the elite, and having these wild parties, uh, murdering prostitutes, these women that would be at the parties and things like that amongst the elite. And a lot of people who say uh, analyze that film are saying that Kubrick, because he was one of the top people in film in Hollywood, uh, made it as a way to let people know that this is going on. This kind of shit is going on. These people are evil. They're deranged, and they have no value for human life or anything virtuous or honorable. They'll stop at nothing for one thing, and that's power, preserving power and influence and that sort of thing. So check out that movie. But that's kind of the situation that you've got going on. Other names that you can look into if you're interested in going down that rabbit hole, at least with the occult connections. Look into Maria Abramovich. She's a really messed up person, another Jewish individual, but she goes and has these different parties and performances with the elite. And again, you can Google this, you can research it. Not made up, it's not tinfoil hat stuff. And she's into uh, one thing was spirit casting. Do you know what spirit casting is, Richard?
Yeah, she's the one that was involved with Clinton, correct?
Yeah. Oh yeah. She's
Yeah, she was with
involved.
Clinton and Weiner and Huma Abedin and all the sickos over there that were into the what they had the spirit casting, and then what were they making, human effigy cakes and stuff and eating them and all kinds of weird stuff. Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
They do these rituals, these black magic rituals, folks, and spirit casting with Maria Abramovich involves taking blood. And I think there's regular blood, and then there's menstrual blood, and then she also mixes in semen, and she mixes in urine and feces, and then she casts it out on like this big canvas or white wall, and it's communicating or connecting with dark spirits and things like that. And imagine somebody doing that, and you have Tom Hanks in the audience, and you have Bill Clinton in the audience, and you have Larry Page in the audience, and Bill Gates and stuff. Like, if you walked in and that was the room, what the hell would you think? You'd be like, what is this? You know? And that's kind of the whole premise around Eyes Wide Shut, actually, is an outsider walks in and sees it. And then that's you find
I
out
see.
what happened to him as a result of him witnessing that. So the whole idea of Epstein Island um, is all that. That all plays into it. You have international intrigue and spying and espionage and things. Wasn't the Russians, folks. It was Israel. Period.
Seems like a
Uh,
crazy plot for a movie, but it really happened.
yeah, I mean, really, very crazy. You couldn't make this shit up. But
Did you
so
see
anything you
the? I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead.
Did you see the interview that was released in this last document dump between Epstein and Steve Bannon? It was about a 2 hour long interview. I watched that interview and when I had time, and it was eye opening for me because other than the articles and headlines about Epstein, I haven't seen him speak a lot. And this is about two hours of him on camera, and so Bannon's basically grilling him in this interview about different aspects of how he was connected, sequence of events, and he starts out by saying that he started out as a mathematician, essentially a math teacher, and then he went to something called the Santa Fe group, where they were trying to understand how advanced algorithms can affect the financial markets. So that's where he got into the money side of it. And then he, from there, went on. He starts telling a story about when he was first incarcerated for the crime he was originally convicted of, which I think was solicitation of prostitution for a minor. He alleges he was in solitary confinement at this federal penitentiary for this, and that he had 2 phone calls he could make, and he called the day that Bear Stearns collapsed, and called the CEO and spoke to him. Then he alleges that he called, I believe, if I recall, it was either Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan is who he called. So he says he had his 2 calls. So he talked to 2 people on the day of the financial collapse, and was giving him advice. But his whole demeanor in the interview was really strange. Obviously, he's a very, very weird guy, but he really seemed like he was a lot more into intellectual side of things, which surprised me because, when you hear about him, you used to hear about this prolific, sexual predator, but he really was kind of a nerd that was a useful nerd in many ways. But essentially from that, it spawned into, like you were saying, all these intelligence connections, all this money, organization. But that's where he was really rooted in. And then fast forward to obviously what we know in the media today. And like what you were saying, all those things that have come out about the connections and ties. His brother, himself, everybody they knew from the time that he was young, look at who his professors were in school. He had connections, and it's a spider web because it goes deep and it goes wide, and there's definitely intelligence connections there. There's definitely connections to the largest financial institutions in the world. He had his hand everywhere, and because of that, he was able to, court a lot of those people and like you said, get them to the island, do favors for them. And then you see some of these emails, the things that are written about. And like we said, chain of custody, we don't really know about, so we don't know if they're legitimate or not. But there's some pretty crazy things in those emails that with some pretty prominent people. And then, obviously one that isn't funny, but sounded funny on the surface was that popped out to me at least was that Epstein was a gamer. He got banned from Xbox Live, but he liked Fortnite, is what they said. People have alleged that his Fortnite account's active in Israel right now. I don't know if that's legitimate or not. Obviously, the news travels slower than lies do. But and then also that he, the story of Bill Gates and the Russian prostitute that allegedly gave him an STD, and then he had to slip his wife antibiotic, and then she actually was interviewed the following week, and she didn't have much to say about that, but she said those are the reasons that she ended her marriage with him, essentially. So she almost, in essence, affirmed what was in those emails that she knew about him. She didn't deny anything. So there's some smoking guns that I think are really legitimate. Who knows what we'll actually ever find out?
No, I don't expect anything to come out of there. I think everything has been redacted, has been revised, edited, and they'll point the finger. You may get stuff that really doesn't matter, but they'll point the finger at who they want to point the finger at.
Exactly.
But all you have to do from a biographical standpoint is look at who his father-in-law was and his three primary financiers throughout his life was Les Wexner, again, big time Zionist, big time supporter of the state of Israel. Also, Edmund de Rothschild, so another big time Zionist, Jewish financier of the Rothschild family. And then you also had Leon Black, who was a billionaire private equity group. He gave tons of money. I think Black was actually the number one financier supporter, big time Zionist, again, a Jewish individual. So it's all Mossad. I mean, that's majority of it. There's other connections globally and everything, but just look into those connections and say, oh man, you must have been the most intelligent, most capable math teacher in the history of mankind to have no formal training, nothing really merit based, but just to walk into billions of dollars. But when you have that kind of pedigree, your connections to a very powerful outlet globally, and that is the Israelis, Mossad. So I'll probably get Epstein tonight for even mentioning that. Right? So if I end up dead, I did not kill myself. Nothing, nothing like that happened. But you can't even have those conversations. The only thing allowed when you're talking about this is say, it's Russia. 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 That's the bad guy at the global level. The only one. Sometimes China, but it's Russia. Russia. So let's see. So we talked about Springfield. We talked about Epstein. What else is going on in the national news, Richard?
Oh, let's see. I had a few things here I had written down. I think the prominent piece of legislation right now that's being discussed on the national side is the SAVE Act, which I think's, I guess it's so intuitive that I can't see why anybody would be against it, but apparently it's misogynistic and harms people that are apparently incapable of getting IDs. So if you live in Ohio, and I've seen this comment from multiple people in Ohio, we already have these laws, which, basic government civics, this is a national law. So Ohio's law, this isn't discussing Ohio's laws. We have fairly decent voter protection laws in Ohio as far as requirements. You have to have matching signatures, a photo ID. IDs are difficult to get here. They're not like they are in some states. And I think this legislation is so simple, but you have to we have to go back to understanding that we've got a dumbed down population that can be spoon fed things like the idea that this is misogynistic. They just keep running this idea that it's aimed at disenfranchising people. But I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that we legislate that only citizens can vote in our federal elections, at least. So this is, I think, going to be one of the big contentions in the Congress in the coming weeks. Senate Democrats have said it's dead in water once it arrived and it's there. I think the Republicans have passed it. I think there's been a few revisions, but it's pretty straightforward. So I don't see why it wouldn't pass, but I think that's probably going to be, that vote's going to be a little contentious. We've got some Republican defectors already. I think, who was it? Was it out of Alaska? I can't recall. Anyway, we've got some defectors and an already,
probably Markowski.
Yeah. And so maybe a situation where Vance is breaking the tie on this one. Although, we go back to the filibuster again. I think that's what it's going to have. I think it has to have the 2/3. So I don't know, that it's going to go anywhere unless they nuke the filibuster. But if we don't do this, it's just too impossible. In reviewing like the election laws in some states, they're just so lax. It's almost laughable. So I think that's the big one on the horizon.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to what Richard was saying with the pending legislation, it's going to impact federal elections, and it would require when you register to vote that you prove citizenship. So they're actually, I think the plan is you don't have to bring like a birth certificate or your green card or whatever. I think they're going to have like a database, I think. Have you heard details on that?
Yeah, it's going to be at the point of registration. So it won't be when you vote. So just to register to vote, you'll have to, I'm looking at the legislation now.
I think they're going to cross-reference it with a database, right? Or are you going to supply?
It's going to be in compliance with the Real ID Act is the plan. So probably.
Okay. So yeah, you're going to have to prove that you're a citizen or you have legal citizenship status, whatever. And then the other part of that is that you're going to have to supply, when you go to vote, you're going to have to supply a valid ID or form of identification. And for us Buckeyes here in Ohio, like Richard said, we already have fairly stringent or responsible. I'm not going to say stringent. It's responsible.
Basic, yeah.
Requirements. But when I lived in Michigan, I'm from here, but I lived for a period of years up there. They're very laxed, and that state historically has been a stronghold for liberals and the Democrat Party. And you go up there and just hand me my ballot. You don't have to present ID. You don't have to, sign a pen pad with your signature to have that match up or anything in case it gets challenged or reviewed or anything. You literally just go up and say, "Hey, I'm this person," and they hand you a ballot. And you go up if you do in-person voting. And now that we're dealing with all these absentee issues, I mean, that's still a huge threat. It's still a huge problem in this country. That shit needs to change. It needs to be how it was historically, that to vote absentee, you had to be serving overseas in the military. I mean, very, 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 very limited application of the absentee ballot or absentee voting. I'm not opposed, Richard. I don't know what you think. I'm not opposed to having a federal holiday on election day.
Absolutely.
And I would get rid of the early voting or limit it to the week of the election. If you want to go to the Board of Elections or whatever and do early voting, okay. Absentee needs to be gotten away with the exception of overseas deployed military. And I think that we'd be a lot better off. I'm not 100% confident in these computers, these voting machines. Personally, I think that the hanging Chad and the issue in Florida back in the election in 2000, I think that they were blowing that out of proportion in order to justify moving to machines, which would be more easily manipulated if they so choose. Because I don't know. You just look at even the returns. I mean, we had an election show here on the Watchman's Report this November, and we waited and waited and waited and waited and waited, and they didn't have the results published on the Board of Elections in Marion County until I think about 11 o'clock that night for a very low turnout. I mean, election. They've centralized a lot of the voting precincts locations. So what gives? How could a bunch of old ladies or whatever did it back when the paper ballots have that shit done by 8 o'clock every time? And now we have these machines and they're registering your vote. So I just don't get it. Why it's taking them so long. And I think that, I don't know, it just raises questions in my mind as far as legitimacy. And that's in Ohio, where again, I think that we do, compared to a lot of these other states, especially Democrat run states, I think we do a lot better of a job.
Absolutely.
I know I have a buddy out in Nevada, and he was saying, I forget how many were mailed to him, absentee ballots, in the 2020 election. I mean, like 12 or something that were mailed to his residence.
It's insane.
And yeah, I mean, that's crazy. So when you're talking about federal elections, now, I think I haven't read the actual legislation, Richard. Maybe you can answer the question. It's only impacting, these changes are only going to be applicable to federal elections, right? So to
Yes.
vote for federal officials.
Yeah.
But if the states want to have effed up standards,
yeah.
then they're still going to be free to do that.
Well,
right?
but this will be yes, that's the law says that, but it will be a downstream effect too, because once you register those people in a database, you can have corrupt elections otherwise, but once you have that mechanism in place, it's going to clean up a lot of other things. There'll be a lot of so this is in purpose is targeted towards non-citizens voting, but it's in essence a broad effort to secure ballot access, because not only obviously you're intentionally casting towards non-citizens, but it's going to stop corruption in many different ways. Fraudulent votes, because I went in this week and I looked at Minnesota, for example. I looked at their registration process in Minnesota, and you have to understand that every fraudulent vote in Minnesota cancels out, essentially nullifies legitimate votes other places in the country, or other people in Minnesota that are voting. And this affects people in Ohio because of national elections, who they put in Congress and the president and other things. But in Minnesota, you can register the day of the election by walking into a poll place. And I know this will sound absurd to you, but this is how easy it is. You can swear you're a citizen, no documentation, and you don't even need an ID. This is what the law says. You have to have an ID, but if you don't have an ID, another registered voter in the precinct can vouch for your identity, and they will register you on the spot and let you vote. No proof of citizenship, no ID, or it could be a person, another registered voter, or a person that is over a housing unit. So essentially your landlord can say, yeah, this guy lives here, because it's proof of residency. And then you can just tell them your name and you're registered on the spot. Nothing before, here in Ohio, you have to register to vote long prior to the day of the election, so that they can actually verify that you're a legal voter. But not in places like Minnesota and these deep blue states where they've got these pockets of corruption going on. And that's why they're going to fight tooth and nail, because obviously we know they're cheating in the elections. It's just proving that. And then again, you got a community where you've got non-citizens that are rampant. Place like Minnesota, where you got tons of Somalis, again involved in chain migration. And how do we know they're not voting? I mean, they likely are.
They likely are, you know. And you hear the Democrats and the leftists here locally that talk about, oh, there's no welfare fraud amongst illegals. There's no voter fraud. You know, how are you going to vote? You have to present an ID and you have to sign and all this, stuff like that. It ain't the same in every state here,
No.
folks. We got 50 states and they all have different policies and procedures around their elections. And the same thing with welfare, benefits and things like that. So, no, it happens. And it happens in Ohio too. It may be more difficult for them to get away with it, but it happens.
Yeah.
And, you have to clean that up. There has to be legitimacy, there has to be integrity. Otherwise, what's the purpose? Otherwise, it's a freaking joke. Why even put on this facade of voting and this notion of a republic or a democracy or whatever the hell we are today? Just say, we're ruining your country and you're just going to have to take it. At that point, just end all this bullshit and this whole facade and just say, yeah, bend over and we're going at you,
And then we've got, under the Biden administration, they administered somewhere between 3 and 4 million Social Security numbers to non-citizens who came in under different programs for asylum and qualified. So if you're in a state, for example, that doesn't require proof of citizenship, but it requires you to have a Social Security number and proof of address, well, now you're eligible to vote. So there's a lot of things like that just from the top down. And what the SAVE Act does that I think is great is that not only is it allows private individuals to pursue civil claims against representatives, but it also empowers the federal government to criminally charge the election. Anybody that registers a non-citizen can be criminally charged. So it's not only a legislative act that makes them, comply with federal law, but it allows them to be charged directly instead of just previously you'd have to charge the person that had registered illegitimately. Now you can charge election workers for registering them. So I think that's a good mechanism in the law.
Yeah. So definitely, look up that and spread the word that this is a very reasonable action that can be taken to protect the integrity of our elections. Because if citizenship means nothing, citizens have the right to vote. And you look historically at suffrage movements and things like that, it should mean something. Universal suffrage, I think, is one of the dumbest notions ever. And I've had that left-wing podcaster, that idiot, and his guests go on there and talk about, oh, well, we should pay people. That was one suggestion, is we should pay people to vote. And the other was, we want everybody to vote. No, you don't. You want people who are informed, people who care, who view it as a civic duty to participate. You want people to have skin in the game, to where they're making a decision, not necessarily based on their self-interest, but what is best for their community, their state, their country, what have you. And we don't have that. It's highly dysfunctional. You got people that just go there and they don't know anybody on that ballot. They may know the national ticket. So you look at the president and say, oh, I like Trump or I like commie law. And then you vote for them. And then you go down and you do straight ballot, straight party. and vote for D or R. If it's a primary, probably just whatever name sounds the best. If you're a woman, statistically, you're more inclined to vote for women. I don't know the reverse if men are biased that way. Probably some are. Um, that's not the way. That's really probably one of the dumbest ways to form your government, you know. But we're taught that this is the greatest form of government ever in the history of mankind, you know. And
It started out
if,
that way.
if you question, I mean, it was at some point, I think it was pretty good.
Yeah.
I think nowadays it's just kind of a bastardized form of socialism. Um, in a false choice, you know, between it's kind of that South Park episode, you know, a giant turd sandwich and a giant douche, you know, that's your choice. That's kind of what we're left with a lot of times. But this will help. This will help. So look into it, encourage your fellow man, your fellow woman to support it and to be vocal. Share it on Facebook, put commentary out there, spread the word. That's the only way that we're going to make any headway on saving this country. So there was something else I wanted to talk about, Richard, but I'm having one of those old man moments. You want to refresh me?
Oh, I don't know. I've got a few other things here that I had
Oh,
written down.
I know what it was. I know what it was. I know what it was. I want to get your opinion on this. Donald Trump's satirical meme with the Lion King.
I had that on my list.
Hey, great minds think alike. Okay, so that's another thing that's been misrepresented by the mainstream media and the left wing press, including our favorite left wing podcaster here in Marion. Um, Even the way he framed it and the way they're all framing it is that, you know, Trump's social media posts racist image or meme of uh, Barack Hussein Obama and Michelle Obama as monkeys, and that's how it's being framed. Not putting it in the proper context to say that does a Lion King meme with a bunch of different animals, and they selected or they put Barack and Michelle on monkey bodies. I mean, that would be a fair assessment, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. But
Um,
when your platform is racism, you see it around every corner, and you know as well as I do that it's the easiest way to get these leftists in a lather. It's the continual idea. It's a running theme. Is Trump's a racist? So you look for around every corner. It's the boogeyman in the room constantly. So this video pops up, which, by the way, the video, it was just a clip of it at the end of another video, but seeing the whole video was hilarious anyway. But it was just a small clip of it at the end of another video that was about election theft, which they didn't report on that, obviously. But, you know, I personally, I don't care. I'm tired of playing word games with leftists. I'm tired of us acting like we have to apologize for things constantly and being on the defensive with these people. They don't care. Nothing they say is serious. They might get the press on it. They might have this $1 trillion propaganda machine out here working for them to gin up this narrative. But I have zero interest in excusing anything anymore, or having dialogue with these people and things like this, because they're not serious about any of it. It's all just propaganda.
exactly, 100% agree. And I mean, I think Trump kind of apologized. I would have said, I'm not apologizing for a Lion King thing. Like, get over it. And honestly, like, you wanted to talk about everything as being tribal and racial groups and demographics. Obama's half white. So you can only have like maybe a quarter in, rage. I don't know. Because he's what? Half white, and then what? A quarter
Kenyan.
Arab and
He's Kenyan.
a quarter black or something like that. Like, but that's how these people think.
Oh
It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And there were all these other different politicians, Democrat politicians, that were on different animal bodies. So if you would have put one on the other, then the other one's going to complain, or they're going to have some, you put them on a rhinoceros. If you put Michelle on a rhino, it'd be like, oh, you're saying she's fat. Like, oh, like that's body shaming and all this stuff. Like, no, you can't engage. You can't engage with them. Do what you want to do. Be funny, be provocative, whatever, but don't apologize. Don't
No, we have
apologize.
to be past that. Yeah, absolutely. It's a losing strategy, and I think that's Trump's superpower is that he's able to just brush those things off. I think he really adopted that philosophy of not defending himself to frivolous allegations like that, because that's what you spend your time doing. I have no interest in talking to a Democrat or a leftist and having a conversation about that video. I don't care. I mean, if you find it offensive, go pout. I don't know what else to say. I don't have any interest in it. I'm done. The entire allowing them to control the narrative for 2 decades about these things is over. I don't think that it's a losing strategy. We just can't keep doing it. Like every time because they will look and find something racist that happens every week. It's what they do. It's like, they're race meteorologists or something. They're just predicting racism around every corner. And then every time they see it, it's the running theme. It's their only platform. They have a failing economic platform. They have a failing social platform. They have nothing to run on. They have the other side's bad, evil people, and abortion, and so they have to make those things scare tactics daily.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah, they have nothing of substance, nothing of value. It's just a rage and hate and platform based on emotion. So, what else is on your old grab bag of topics there?
My next one, which I don't really care about a lot, but I thought was funny to talk about, was the Super Bowl drama, which I don't even watch.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about that with you too. So that's stupid. I mean, I didn't watch it. Sports ball. I don't give a shit about sports ball. And college football, I'll watch the playoffs. I'll watch the Buckeyes now and then. Do I really give a shit? Do I get into it? Not so much anymore, because it's bread and circuses, folks. It's just a distraction for the masses, opium for the masses. And if you enjoy it, more power to you. Life sucks in a lot of ways. Society's crumbling. You might as well have some release in some way. So if spectating sports is your release, then have at it. Enjoy it. But I didn't watch the Super Bowl, and I certainly didn't watch the Bad Bunny rendition of the halftime show. Did you watch it? Did you even see it in repeat or anything?
No.
So I'm not the best person to comment. I read some articles. I know what the content of it was. It was a very, very, very leftist, Democrat, liberal, open borders, all those cause celebs of the left. Is that a fair assessment, you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And Bad Bunny, I guess, is some type of entertainer, rapper, pop. I don't know what the hell. Born in Puerto Rico. And that's one thing that people were saying, these leftists were saying, well, he's an American citizen and he's blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, Puerto Rico's a territory. Like, they don't have representation in our federal government, as far as in Congress. They're not eligible to be elected. They are a territory of the United States. Now, are they of Spanish heritage or Afro-Latino? Yeah, they are. And that's their culture. That's their history. It's not American. Puerto Ricans were kind of first arrived in this country, mainly in New York City, Metro New York City. beginning 1960s, roughly. Think West Side Story, that sort of thing. But I don't know. Then you had the alternative. You had the conservative halftime show featuring Kid Rock. Who else was on that one?
I'm not really sure. I know there's some, half dozen headliners, but I didn't watch it either. So
I didn't watch it either. But TPUSA, and what network was that running on? Like Newsmax or
I don't know.
O&M?
I know they broadcast from. I saw it in the YouTube feed. I know they broadcast from several of their channels. Charlie Kirk's channel, Turning Points. There were several channels that broadcast it. So I think it cumulatively brought in 7 or 8 million views to the stream, which is pretty good size for being on during the Super Bowl.
Not bad, but the NFL, in addition to being bread and circuses and distractions, opium for the masses, that sort of thing that we already discussed, the NFL has been very politicized. So you think of the kneeling and Black Lives Matter and the introduction of the Black National Anthem playing alongside of our national anthem of the United States. It's been engaged heavily in these political campaigns. And this is just another example of that. This was a deliberate effort to further divide this country. I mean, whatever happened to, Hank Williams Jr. and, singing before Monday Night Football, and it's about football. It's about sports. It's about competition. It's about excellence. Throw a little bit of beer in there and stuff. And now everything's politicized. And these leftists get in these organizations and they just jam it down your throat. What do you think?
Yeah, that's the Marxist theology, or I'm sorry, ideology, is to capture institutions. So that's when they can find one like this that's kind of 50-50 as far as viewership, and obviously what has long been considered to be one of the largest viewing platforms in the country. With prime commercial space being the highest of the year and insane viewership. Yeah, they love capturing things like that, so they can propagandize it. Going back to what you just said, I'll bring up 2 points which I've heard or seen several times since this, which is like the Democrats' favorite flavor is logical fallacies and argument, but they would take issue with 2 things you said. One is the term American, which is their new favorite semantical argument, is that America does not mean us, the United States of America. Even though if anywhere you go in the world, if you say I'm American, they know you're talking about the United States of America. They say, which was the theme of this performance as well, was that this guy essentially listed off all the countries inside of the continent because that's their argument, is that America is so much larger than just the United States of America. It's this continent of all these different countries, and that it's essentially arrogant for us to think of ourselves as Americans. Bad Bunny's an American, and he may identify as American. I don't know anything about him personally, but that's one of their favorite semantical arguments, is that we're kind of to paint people that use that term as ignorant, like we don't understand geography, like we don't know the American continent exists. It's a silly argument, but that's the entire basis of the contemporary Democrat, is silly arguments. And going back to the show, the next argument they made, well, you guys just don't like this guy, obviously, because we're racist, right? We don't like this Latino guy because we're racist. We don't want this Latino guy on here because we didn't have any problem with all these other foreigners that performed at halftime shows. Well, here's the big distinction that you need to make. You can say U2, you can, down the road, they list off, Shakira and all these other people. This guy came out to a packed stadium and performed in a language that most of the people there didn't understand. Okay, you can say 40 million Americans speak Spanish. It doesn't matter. you're in a show that is predominantly watched by English-speaking people, and in their face, you got this guy performing. First of all, his lyrics are obscene mostly. The things I went and looked up a few of the songs. I looked at the songs that he performed, and I looked at the English translation of those lyrics. It's like, describing genitals, sexual relations, different things like that are all in these lyrics. So he sung these in Spanish, obviously, and was able to get away with saying things that you couldn't say in English on TV. But again, the whole thing is a slap in the face. You got this guy coming out here, like you said, they're throwing this in our face that this guy is going to speak another language than most of us can understand. Regardless of whether we should even have 40 million Spanish-speaking people in the country or not. Even if we do, we've got 300 million English-speaking people. So the idea of having somebody perform there and then comparing them again to other foreigners who, last time I checked, U2, I can understand their lyrics. And then this guy comes out and his entire performance is about basically tearing down, I don't want to say the sovereignty and essence of the United States, but making it seem like we're just this kind of plurality of America, that the distinguishment of being an American, a citizen of the United States doesn't really exist. And that was kind of the undertone that I picked up on in those two really weak arguments of what American means, which, again, is just a really dumb semantical argument they make. And then this guy performing in a language that, we didn't know. We're just supposed to sit here and act like we love the performance or something. I have no idea what you said and if I would have, I probably would have turned it off anyway, because from what I can see, a lot of it's, vulgar stuff and stuff that, again, any other English-speaking person probably would have not got the show if they had sung these songs in English. So that's my two thoughts on it. I think obviously, like I said, it's a captured institution, and it's just in our face propaganda.
Yeah, and why do people, any decent American, and I realize there aren't a ton of those. I mean, we've fallen hard and we've fallen fast culturally, demographically. But why, if you are a decent red-blooded American out there, why would you support this institution, the NFL, or any of these that just propagandize you, that throw it in your face that your country is being destroyed, and that put these notions out there that are just lies about your origins of your people, of America. To hell with them. Screw them. In that shit is what I say. So, I don't know. I guess TPUSA, it was some reaction to that. So we hope for some reactionary force to exist to counterbalance all this leftist shit and the communism and everything else and the tribalism.
We have to ridicule these people is what we have to do. We have to bring them out and show them and force them to admit that their ideas are bad. And until we do that, they're going to continue because they have the media. They've got $1 trillion propaganda machine that's propping up all their bad ideas. So we have to meet them every place we can and make them look foolish.
And you know who's behind a lot of this, don't you? As far as the advertising campaigns becoming more and more in your face with these Fortune 500 companies, that sort of thing. You probably know.
I don't know who you're referring to in particular now.
It's good old Larry Fink.
Oh, okay, BlackRock. Yeah.
So BlackRock, folks, another institution that you should really do a deep dive in. Maybe we'll do that sometime. We'll expose all these bastards. But
you're really going to get Epstein now.
I know we're totally getting Epstein. But Larry Fink is another Jewish fellow who runs BlackRock, and BlackRock has controlling shares in pretty much every Fortune 500 company in the United States. Total asset value is 11 to 12 trillion dollars. And
nothing like them ever in history.
2008, it was $500 billion. So how do they go from 500 billion to 11 or 12 trillion in a period of less than 20 years? Well, they have a special relationship. Imagine that. Special relationship with the Federal Reserve, whereby they're essentially the allowed to purchase shares with Federal Reserve funds that they get for basically no interest, and go and buy up controlling shares in any number of companies. And Larry Fink did an interview about 2 years ago. It was before the Budweiser. It wasn't long before the whole Dylan Mulvaney Budweiser fiasco, in which a lot of Americans boycotted drinking Budweiser products. But Larry Fink did a speech, and he said, we have at BlackRock, we have been utilizing our influence with because they have controlling shares. They own most of these companies, so what they say pretty well goes. They said we've been kind of doing a slow, methodical introduction of more and more uh, progressive action, and in our advertising in particular. So if you noticed 5, 10 years ago, a lot of people don't notice. They're not that perceptive to these things. Richard and I are, because we're very well
Watchmen.
all this stuff. We're watchmen. That's right. And when you look at television advertisements, that is probably the easiest example. Then you look at like Netflix shows and Disney shows and who they cast and what the narrative is and blah blah blah. You'll start seeing this. Well, Fink says we've been doing kind of a slow, methodical up to this point, using our influence to achieve social justice and like DEI, woke, that sort of thing, up to this point. And he said we're going to escalate things. We need to put this into hyperdrive to affect the change that we want to see. Well, it wasn't that long. You had Dylan Mulvaney with the transsexual spokesman for Bud Light. And you see a whole lot of other examples of that. Well, the NFL is the same thing. So it's organizations, these huge corporations like BlackRock, Vanguard would be another one of the other top two companies. But it's people like Larry Fink that are doing this, that are forcing this change and throwing it in our faces on a daily basis. So look into that as well. And,
yeah, I think one of the big pushes that BlackRock was involved in was about, I don't know, 5 years ago, the movement towards ESG, which was kind of a global framework where they were, essentially incorporating all those things kind of into a metric. And what their intentions were, I think it's kind of tapered off a little bit now because of Trump giving the movement a beating here in the last year. But that was kind of their goal, was essentially like a corporate credit score or something along those lines. And they were going to make these companies basically with their money capitulate and bring in all this woke ideology and just keep shoving this stuff in our faces. So I don't know. I don't know if you saw the Chevy Suburban commercial that came out this last Christmas, but it was pretty good. It had a normal looking family in it, and they had a nice Suburban, and they had some nice memories from their raising their kids. And I was like, wow, this seems like a commercial that would have been on 20 years ago. So there wasn't like a dude in a dress, and they weren't like, towing kayaks behind a Prius to go to some pride event or something. So
it's actually about a car.
Yeah.
That's at this point, whenever I see that, I'm like, wow, what a rarity. And it's actually about the product. That's like a local Marion restaurant here, I don't know, a month and a half ago, they did this social media promo about, I think it was a big
Big gay
gay
brunch.
bash,
Yeah.
and they really build it up, about come to this restaurant, and we're having our big gay bash, and we love, you know when it wasn't that long ago, Richard, that going to the restaurant was about eating food,
Yeah.
not like celebrating what you may or may not stick in your asshole. You know, I just make dinner. That's it.
What was on the menu though? That's what we got to know. There could have been some correlation there.
I don't know. I don't want to eat. I don't really want to think about that, because that was another thing that I didn't voluntarily learn about. But it was some clicking through something or on some TV show, and they were talking about diets for if you're a bottom or a top, and how it varies, and you got to really watch if you're in that lifestyle. And I'm like, I don't want to know this. I don't want to know about the dietary, choices of if you're a bottom or a top. Like, I don't know.
But
But when it
imagine
comes
the
to
double
restaurants,
standard.
or yeah, or beer companies or whatever, just make the product. Make the
Imagine
product.
imagine having a big straight brunch of the outcry. If you
Yeah,
wanted to have a straights only brunch, celebrate being straight. That's how far we've gone in this country into insanity. Is we can just take something like this and just completely disregard everybody else.
yeah. Most
Like you said, just
people
pick the
do
food.
not. Yeah, but most people don't care what you do in the privacy of your own home. Who you
Yeah,
sleep with, what you do in whatever orifice or appendage of your body. Like, most people don't care. But don't just constantly put it in everybody's faces and force it down their throat, to use probably a not appropriate term. Um, I don't know, but that's what they do. That's what they do. So,
I like to
all
call them the
right,
Rainbow
Richard.
Mafia.
Yeah, it really is. It
That's what
really
they
is.
are. It's like you have to pay the protection fee or else
Yeah, yeah.
bend the knee.
Well, we've gone an hour and 40 minutes. What I thought was just going to be, maybe an hour of bullshitting. Like, we went an hour and 40 minutes. So, uh, we're going to try to do these national shows. I personally would like to do once a week, um, because I think that there's a lot to talk about. And when you have the mainstream media and you have the local left wing podcaster out there spewing his propaganda, um, you got to have some voice locally that can help digest and at least put something else out there. You may disagree with us. You may think we're a bunch of right wing radicals or whatever, but um, at least listen, try to weigh, look in, investigate. That's what you have. That's what you have to do. You have a duty to make an informed decision on each of these topics, um, when it comes to politics or current events, whatnot. So we just do our best to share our thoughts on it, and try to come at everything from, you know, a genuine, heartfelt perspective. At least that's my commitment, and I know Richard feels the same way. So,
Absolutely.
um, probably probably next week have another national. Maybe not. Sometimes we get hammered with interview weeks, so we've got, two interviews scheduled for the week. But I do think that it's important to try to have these national shows as well. So until next time, for Richard McDonald, I'm Cody Higley, and this has been the Watchman's Report. So remember, folks, a watchman is always vigilant. Have a good night.
Sound the alarm! To arms! They are here! Sound the alarm! To arms! They are here!